Hi, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. With me today, I've got Dr. Jasmine Pradissitto, and we're going to be talking about why each board, so a board of directors, and each company needs to have an artist on the board.
Brilliant.
Jasmine, where can people find you?
At the moment, I have a show on at the London Museum of Water and Steam, which is on until the end of October.
I'm going to come to see you on
Yes, you are. Yeah, you're coming
at Brentford.
Yeah, you're coming with Julie on Saturday, which will be lovely. Yes. So that's on until the end of October. And obviously you can reach me on LinkedIn, or you can email me, or have a look at my website and ping me a message. I love it when I get messages from people.
Excellent. So to dive in, one of the things that I wanted to ask you is that nobody wants to be bad at anything anymore. Explain.
So I think we now live in a society which has been effectively curated, right? Everything is about the visual perfection and the appearance that we've got it all sorted. And of course we know that's
Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, for example, right? So an awful lot of surface perfection with very little depth, shall we say. And I think also I've worked with so many students over the years, not so much now, but this desire to just suddenly be famous or successful without understanding that actually what you should really have is the desire to become good at something, that old-fashioned idea of 10,000 hours. And we're sort of losing that a little bit. And what I think people really don't understand is, and it's again another wonderfully old-fashioned term, resilience. I'll use an analogy. An artist love using analogies and metaphors. There was a case, I think, where they grew. Not I think. I know that they grew trees within a greenhouse, and they grew fairly tall, but they kept breaking. They kept snapping off. And what they realized about these trees is that the only way that they could grow strong is if they were outside and they were being buffeted by the wind. Right? And we now know, of course, that trees are some of the strongest forms of engineering that there are. So this idea of fast forwarding to what appears to be perfection without going through the process is I think it's incredibly harmful. And I think we should stop using words like failure. I don't think there's any such thing as failure. In science and art, if you think about it, the best creations I've ever had are when there's a chance element. I spill something or I let something drip. I can never repeat it. We know there are so many stories of, from penicillin on, from when things have been discovered. But of course, the one thing that science, one of the many things that science and art share is attention, the ability to observe when something is useful. So yeah, that's the thing. No one wants to look bad at anything anymore, and they've kind of forgotten that actually that's the fun bit. It's the doing, right? I'm very much an analog person, and I know that we learn by doing, we learn by experiencing.
Why do you think that we want to consume?
It gives you a high. You get more of a brain high in the anticipation of consumption than you do from the actual consumption. We all know that. It's been, again, there's data, and I hate reverting to data because that's one of the things I don't really want to talk about. We have to use data, we're so used to it. That you look forward more to a holiday than when you're actually on it.
Yeah.
So, and again, I guess in terms of security, is it stuff that gives us security? But one of my theories is that the same highs that you get when you consume things are very much like when you create a piece of music, or you're having a go at making something, or you're getting your hands dirty, or you're even deciding what you might wear and putting together an outfit that looks really good. And my hope, and this is one of the reasons that for me the creative industries have been so overlooked, not just in terms of product. We always think about product because we're always trying to think about solutions. It's the process. It's the process by which we get to the thing that we've made, which is so beneficial to human beings, because we are effectively analog creatures. And I'll go back to that thing that we learn and we get our highs, if you like, through experiencing things.
So going back to the title of the podcast, why does every board need an artist? Why does every board need an artist?
Well, when you think of artists, they are effectively entrepreneurs. They share an awful lot of the same qualities. They are not risk averse. They are open to nuance and ambiguity. They will take chances. But the difference between artists, not just artists, when I talk about artists, by the way, I mean everything from a poet to a writer to a musician. I'm talking about all of the humanities, all the creative arts. But the difference between what the artist does, if you like, and the entrepreneur is that the way that we value success now is on output. It's always coming down to that product. And very often when people look at things like a piece of art, they kind of go, well, it's nice, isn't it? But I don't need it. Without realizing that actually before we even we didn't have written language, but we were painting on cave walls. Right? So our ability to tell each other stories, our ability to paint, our ability to make and sit in community doing things came way before our ability to analyze or produce data or anything like that. So for me, when I look at, I think one of the things I've experienced, certainly being both in science and art, is how very siloed we are, how very much, especially the more expert people become, again, that not
because you're, in your terms of experience, you have a doctorate in physics.
Yeah.
But you are also an artist.
I am, and I've run my own business for 20 years. I ran a business because I don't fit anywhere. I had to actually create my own lifestyle, and I thought, well, I need to make money as well as make art and bring out my son. And so, I've done all of those types of things, and I know that you can do it with a bit of creative thinking. But when I have worked with a few businesses, I've worked with an architectural firm, I've worked with some engineering firms. And invariably what happens is, certainly with engineering firms, they will hone in on the data and tell you how amazing their mathematics is. And I will have to say to them, yeah, but hang on a minute. Why did you make this thing? What was that drive? What was that spark? What was that story that you told yourself? I said, because that's what people want to hear. And if you look at in terms of, I was doing a bit of reading about this. Apparently, there's something called the McKinsey Index, because again, we always like try and relate things to quantity. The more creative a company, the bigger, the more successful it is. That might be on the bottom line, but I would also argue that now with the advent of AI, and also if you go back to the story of our progression, it's all been based on energy, Tim. Whether it was our own physical energy, and then it became horses, and then it became coal and oil. Our energy needs are obviously changing. We are no longer able to make things at cheap profit anymore. AI is going to take an awful lot of this work away. So we really have to reframe what it is that success is again. And that, I guess, is one of the biggest stumbling blocks. But this is why I think we need people with very different perspectives on boards, because we're not trying to achieve the same things. And very often, again, people, and I'm guilty of it myself. I remember during my PhD, I couldn't see the wood for the trees. You need somebody else to come in from outside who doesn't understand your language to break it down to its lowest common denominator and go, actually, the problem you think you have is not the problem you actually have.
I think quite often we have confirmation bias, isn't it? That what we're looking for is what we want.
Yes, precisely. And also, wouldn't it be if you look at some, in fact, some of the biggest tech firms, I don't know about so much now, but they were all based on experimentation and play. They made a big deal of having play at the heart of things, because when you think of where ideas come from, you can't innovate between 10 and 12 on a Tuesday. It doesn't work like that. It's a whole sort of right, left, right brain thing, which is actually something I was discussing with Ian McKilchrist last week. And in order to be able to allow your brain to do that, you can't falsely create these conditions. It's a way of beginning to observe, and also it's about letting go of control, which I would argue is again something that most businesses would really struggle with. But if they only realize that true alchemy happens when you actually let go of things, people will create things on their own. Well, it's just like magic, really.
Yes, I think that there's I think that there's probably research that shows that we can't. I mean, the famous quote that I always give is the one from Brian Solis, which is that we tried to innovate, but I was stuck in meetings. And it's that sort of thing. And it's also, we've all done brainstorming sessions where it's like, right now it's close the door, we're all going to innovate now. And it's like,
yeah, it doesn't, because, we now, one of the wonderful things about neuroscience, I think if I had my time again, I probably would have done neuroscience and art. We now understand what the creative process is. If you want to come up with the eureka, there is a process by which you do it, right? And this is one of the things I share with my students. And it's not, the way that I kind of describe it is, I always think of my mind as minestrone. Coming from the Italian, you put the ingredients in. You put the ingredients in. So you look at I used to say to my son when he came home from the summer holidays, Kieran, if you don't do anything else, just read the title of your project and then stuff it back in your bag and forget about it. But at least you got the title in your bag, because what will happen is your brain will then, without you realizing it, pick out the inspirations, pick out the minestrone bits, if you like. And then if you go and do things like, it's called the 3 Bs, isn't it? Bath, bus, and what's the other one? I can't remember what the other one is. But the number of times you're in the bath or in the shower and you will suddenly have an illumination, right? Because you've allowed your brain to kind of incubate. Or you might be doing something on automatic, like cleaning. But is that there's not a student in the world that didn't have to clean their entire bedroom before they had an exam, right? Because that, again, that's where magic happens. So there is this process, but you have to allow it to happen. And I think that's what people struggle with. They think, if I don't appear to be being active, I'm not being active. And yet, as I say, the really good stuff is happening when you're doing something else almost. And just to add to that, the natural world is so central to my work. But we now know, again, through neuroscience, that simply going for a walk in a forest makes you much, much more creative. Like being outside makes you much, much more creative.
Yes. Well, the body is actually designed to be outside, isn't it? And,
yes.
and actually designed to be moving. And research shows that if you're one of the reasons for that is that you were probably running you were being chased by a saber-toothed tiger. Therefore, you needed to be creative it's actually your preservation of the human.
Yes. Yeah. And you're completely right. You know that thing when you've had a project for ages, right? And you go, oh God, I really can't do this. And then literally the night before, it's like, ding, and you go, now you're telling me how to do it? And it's that saber-toothed tiger thing, because you think, oh my God, you're just about to die. So I'm going to give you that little nugget of an idea at the back. And we forget, because this is the thing, the exhibition that I have at the minute at the museum is all about the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
And we forget that until 300 years ago, we were creatures of the land. We had lived on the land for thousands and thousands of years. And then literally within the space of 300 years, we came off it and we started to live in really enclosed spaces with machines that did things, where the water wasn't clean. We were on top of one another. And we have suffered because of that, because you can't, it would take, first of all, would you want to adapt to that at all? But we do suffer. And this, I guess, is why we go to big open spaces and we go to the sea and we go to the mountains, because your brain literally reboots when you do that.
So a lot of today is about the bottom line. What do you think?
What do you mean the bottom line, Tim?
Today, everything is about making profit.
It is. And I think we need to re-examine what we mean by profit in an era where everything is literally changing overnight, and where we know that there is a huge, not just mental health crisis, but a huge environmental crisis. And these things are all linked. And that's why I return back to, if you're an artist or a musician, you see patterns. That's what you do. You get used to looking at things and knowing that. For me, I know that absolutely everything is linked in some way. Sometimes it takes me a while to figure it out. And if we could realize that actually every single one of those elements, by perhaps changing the system in one way, will actually benefit all the others, it's incredibly, it's a very efficient way of doing things. So, if you're a company and you want to be innovative and you think, what's the next new thing? I can guarantee if you speak to many artists, they have their tentacles out. They understand the zeitgeist before it happens. I know that's certainly been my history. I'm usually a bit ahead of the curve in terms of what I'm making. I guess maybe, I don't know if it's because you are just picking things up from people, or you're reading things, or you're going down rabbit holes that other people aren't. But if you want to know what's just around the corner, speak to an artist, speak to a musician, and again, when sometimes kind of go, oh, well, they are all a bit fluffy, I always remind people, listen, you think it's fluffy until you have one of those existential moments in your life, like you fall in love, or someone dies, or you're questioning, the meaning of your life. And then we all revert to the same song on repeat, or staring at the same piece of art. It is fundamental to the way that we tick, Tim.
And the way that we think it is, because we think that we think in facts, but in fact we're not. We're actually driven by chemicals, aren't we?
We are. And we can't. The really interesting about the hemispheres of the brain is that we, for the last 300 years, we have given value to language, number, rationality. The way that part of the brain pays attention is not the most important. We can't actually put into words, and this is one of the things that I think so many artists struggle with when they're trying to talk about their work, for example. You can't put into words something that you feel. We have mistaken ourselves for thinking creatures that feel, whereas I believe we are feeling creatures that think. Yeah.
So when we met to do this and prepare for this, I know some people would be amazed to know that I do prepare. You talked about birdsong, and you said that an ability to hear birdsong, and you said that was worth equivalent of £1,500. It could be $1,500 in your pay packet.
Yeah, I remember reading, and again, it goes back to our ancient ways of being. And I was thinking about this because I have cats, don't really get very much birdsong in the garden, but I remember reading a Guardian article years ago, because we feel good when we hear birds. So I remember when I went to visit my parents in New York when I was a kid, I thought there were no birds here, and I missed it. And yeah, they kind of, again, they equated it, let's give it a quantity, that the well-being gives, it's like having that extra money in your pay packet. And I think it comes down to, if you can hear birdsong, it gives you that ancient security that you're not being chased. There are no predators in the area. And so again, this is all subconscious, and it's incredibly deeply hardwired. And even if you think of the sound of rain or the river or the sea, it gets your brain into a certain harmonic where you feel at peace, because you know that you're safe, because you know there is water for you to drink, and therefore you have one of the most fundamental things that you need. So we come from nature, and I think we have forgotten that, and we have forgotten that all our progress, all of it, has come from the natural world. And we need to, and that's, I think, one of the reasons we're also not feeling very good in ourselves as well, Tim.
I listened to a Desert Island Discs recently on Radio 4. And unfortunately, I can't remember the name of the person, but they're a famous gardener. And she said that, when she was asked at the end of what was her favorite song, one of her picks was actually the sound of the nightingale.
Oh, wow.
And actually, and she'd picked, all kinds of people like Eddie Cochran as her songs and that. And then what happened right at the end, they said, so what's your number one that you're going to take to the desert island? And she said, and she thought for a second and said, it's the sound of the nightingale.
Oh, how beautiful. And, when we met, it was something that you said on stage about storytelling. And just when you're telling that story,
that was going to be my next question, actually.
Because it just came to mind. And you just reminded me about one of the saddest stories, because I made a sculpture based on this, and it's called the bird that lost its song, and it's about the honey badger bird, apparently in Australia, and there are very few of them left. And the reason there are very few of them left is that they've been dying out, and they've forgotten how to share their song. And if they can't share their song, they can't mate. And I remember it broke my heart when I heard that story, because I thought that's what we are in danger of doing as a species, forgetting our song. And that's, again, why I think the arts and the humanities are so important in reminding us what our song is.
Jasmine, thank you so much for today.
My pleasure.
I'm not going to ask you another question, because I actually think that's a really good way to finish the show, around that humans have forgotten to share their song, which I think is a lovely thing to say. So remind people where they can get hold of you.
So you can email me at jasmine@pradissitto.com. You can find me at the London Museum of Water and Steam with Tender Machines, which is on until the end of October. Or you can ping me a message on Instagram, and I would love to hear from you. And Tim, may I just thank you? Thank you so much for hosting something that may be a bit different, but I hope I hope it was a good story that I told. So.
I think it's no. I think it's. I've just been sitting there thinking about the conversation. I talk to people, and they're it could be about autonomous vehicles or something like this, and I think that has as a story that's important to tell. But when I met you, what I thought is that there's something here which is about that we do need to look at the world differently. We sometimes head down thinking about things and not having that open mind and kind of letting things come towards us sometimes. And
Yes.
I think what you talk about is about opening our senses to that.
Yes.
And I think that is so important. And therefore, that's why I wanted you to come on, and I wanted you to share that with people. I think that's this has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you.
No, thank you so much, Tim, for having me on, and thank you people who were listening. It's appreciated.
Thank you very much.